As you probably already know, I'm very passionate about energy, and for a simple reason. It's what allows us to have great opportunities in life. It's what has allowed Americans and people around the world to live longer, more opportunity-rich lives. Proud to be part of this administration. It's about more energy and more opportunity, not less energy and less opportunity. The position is pretty simple. We're 50 days into this administration. And as you can see, probably not much has happened yet, and it's been boring for everyone in the press corps. But we're hoping to pick it up a little bit. And along that same line, I will sign today what I just announced on stage earlier, which is our fourth action on LNG export approvals. This is for the Delfin offshore LNG export terminal in the Gulf Coast. 1.8 BCF a day of natural gas the license goes up to. This is a huge amount of American energy, American economic activity that will benefit both our country and our allies abroad who import this. But before I open up to questions, I'll quickly take our fourth action on LNG export approvals. So 50 days, we've gotten a little bit done. We're hoping to pick up the pace. There's a lot of challenges for American energy and global energy, and this administration is passionate about increasing the availability of energy, the opportunities for American citizens, and national security for our country and our allies abroad. With that, I'll open it up.
Mr. Secretary, Ari Nada from Bloomberg, can you say if you plan on canceling about 100 congressionally mandated sales from the SPR as you seek to refill it?
The specifics about how and when we'll refill the SPR, that goes through Congress and all that, so no new details on that, Ari.
Thank you very much. Malcolm Moore from the Financial Times. Can I ask you what active measures the administration is taking both at home and overseas to lower oil prices, and what range would you like to see them trading at?
Well, first of all, markets set prices. So we certainly believe it's in the best interest of the American people and honestly the citizens of the world to have lower oil prices. So the actions of this administration are to make it easier to produce more oil and natural gas for the producers, and therefore you get more investment. So the previous administration, made it harder and harder to get permits to drill wells, to build pipelines, to build the infrastructure you need to grow production. And we got the obvious result. If you make it harder to do something, you get a little bit less of it. Previous administration did nothing to reduce the demand for oil and natural gas, so we got prices that went up quite a bit, averaging, I think, a little over $80 if you use the Brent price during the last 4 years. So the Trump administration's goal is exactly the opposite, to encourage capital investment, make it easier to build infrastructure, therefore lower the costs of people making decisions to drill oil and gas wells, and therefore grow supply. So more supply will lead to lower prices and more opportunities. No, I don't have quantitative numbers for you.
Yeah, Chase Winner with Energy Intelligence. Somewhat related to this question, but can you address a little bit the contradiction between drill baby drill and lower oil prices, and what is going to compel producers to ramp up production, and what gives you the confidence that there are efficiencies and innovations that can be squeezed to increase production?
So great question. One reason I won't have a specific price is in a top-down world where the government decides what you can do and what you can't do and what price you can sell at and what price you can't sell at, you can set prices. But in the American economy, we want to see and reinvigorate, it's supply and demand, and the marketplace does that. And of course, drill baby drill also requires build baby build. My remarks earlier today showed the surge in American natural gas production, the surge in American exports of natural gas that came together with a decline in price. But to produce more, you have to have the infrastructure to move it to market. So natural gas is now fully supplied by United States domestic. Our domestic production supplies our domestic needs. We export to Mexico via pipeline. We export a little bit to Eastern Canada for access there. And we export to dozens of nations around the world via LNG. Our goal is to continue to grow that. And again, to continue to lower barriers, which again, more supply, lower prices.
Pippa Stevens with CNBC. You're talking about the need for more energy. So then why is the administration not taking all of the above approach and canceling offshore wind and not promoting that, even if more expensive today, could reach economies of scale and be cheaper?
Offshore wind is actually not that new. Subsidies for wind are 30 years old. Offshore wind has been developed for well more than a decade in Europe. And everywhere it's been deployed, everywhere, it's incredibly high prices, incredibly huge investment, and a large footprint on the local communities and around. So it's been very unpopular for people that live near offshore wind turbines. So I would say a combination of popular opposition to it for the visual and environmental impacts, and equally big is just the incredible inflationary rise, incredibly inflationary price rise it delivers everywhere and always. That is the record of offshore wind.
So Corey Paul Platts, right here. In the conditional export approval for Commonwealth LNG, the DOE said that a final decision would be informed by this process ending March 20th, this proceeding ending March 20th over the Biden export study. Why is it important to go through that process, and how quickly after March 20th would you expect to see final approvals, like days, weeks, months?
Yeah. So look, the new administration, we are radically committed to honesty, transparency, data. And so we had a process opened up to create a report that would study the impact of LNG exports on American consumers for a legitimate concern. If we send more abroad, maybe it's going to rise prices. So a study was done at the DOE quickly at the end of the last administration. You probably saw a letter released by my predecessor saying this is going to drive up prices and be destructive for the U.S. economy and maybe not even a positive for climate change. If you actually read the report itself, it didn't draw those conclusions at all. A very funny disconnect between the summary that was released publicly and the actual data in the report. But we're going one step further, opening that up for public comment from everyone. We want to hear the inputs. We want that back and forth. We want to challenge conclusions and then get to what's the most reasonable conclusions we can draw from this work and study, run that process, and then issue final permit approvals based on a full vetting of the facts.
Mr. Secretary, Frank Kane from Arabian Gulf Business Insights. I wonder if you have any message for your friends in OPEC Plus. They are returning some barrels to the market. Are they doing it fast enough to help you get gas prices down here in the States?
We're pleased, of course, to see OPEC returning barrels to the marketplace. And I think, look, it's very early on. We're only 50 days in, but the trend in energy prices has indeed been downward. And I think that's a market perception that, yeah, America's open for business. America is going to allow producers to grow and expand and support our allies abroad. So I think we are indeed pleased with the OPEC actions. No specific requests or demands from me. More energy means better lives.
Secretary Tim Gardner at Reuters, here, right in front. Hi.
Hey.
What's your view of the LPO, vast lending machine that's there? How should it be used?
So in new energy technologies, for example, fourth generation nuclear energy, small modular reactors. We've had a decade or 2 decades of innovation trying to develop a new technology here. None of them actually built and deployed in the United States yet. Are there nudges that don't disrupt market forces, that don't subsidize incumbent players? Are there nudges to get things going? I think it's necessary for brand new things. So we are looking very selectively to use LPO to nudge things that ultimately can deliver much more affordable, reliable, secure energy. You know, the portfolio I'm inheriting of loan is not so much like that. You know, there's a lot of lending to mature industries and large companies that we wouldn't have chosen to do, but we inherit a loan book, you know, and we follow the rule of law. So we've got to manage that loan book as well and do the best we can for the American taxpayers.
Mr. Secretary. Hi, Avi Salzman of Barron's. How you doing? I was interested in nuclear, and you know, a lot of companies that are interested in funding it still say the federal government needs to fill the gap in the initial capital funding. You know, even Google is saying that there needs to be some cost overrun insurance, or there needs to be some money for capital construction by the federal government. Do you agree with that?
Well, Avi, I think as I just said, I'll say again that I do think there is going to need to be a nudge, both on the regulatory front and likely some capital deployment from the government to start that process of commercial innovation and activity.
Yeah, right here. Sergio. Whoa. LNG and world markets. Following up from our conversation at Plaquemines, I was going to say, how do we walk and chew gum at the same time? AI versus LNG. How do you grow exports and AI and yet keep natural gas prices affordable, balanced?
Great question. And look, I spoke a little bit about that earlier this morning, that we've seen a surge in U.S. natural gas production with actually less and less drilling rig activity to grow that production. So U.S. LNG exports are going to grow rapidly, and demand for natural gas for electricity prices is going to go rapidly. I think the supply response of the production of natural gas, I think the marketplace will take care of that. You know, we've got 100 rigs running today. If that went to 120 rigs, you could service surging exports and rising demand from AI. But you asked the right question. We certainly don't want to grow our export industry and penalize American citizens. That is an unacceptable outcome. I think our biggest problem there is enabling the building of more infrastructure, because we already have citizens. If you live in Connecticut or Massachusetts or Maine or Vermont, you pay very expensive natural gas prices, very expensive electricity prices, but you're right near Pennsylvania, like the treasure trove of shale gas. That's infrastructure that's standing in the way and driving prices up. So the administration is passionate about allowing us to build more infrastructure so that all Americans can benefit from low-cost natural gas, which lowers heating bills, which increases job opportunities in their area, and lowers the cost of electricity and business costs as well. So it's a yes, yes, and yes. But you're right, consumer prices is top of list.
Hi, Ben LaFay from Politico. Thanks for doing this. Speaking of driving up prices, any thoughts on the administration's tariffs on driving up prices for infrastructure?
Look, I think we're early on in this. I say look back at President Trump's first term. This is a businessman passionate about helping American people. We had tense negotiations in the first Trump administration, and the end result was inflation averaged below 2%. And we saw blue-collar wages raise faster than wages across the rest of the income spectrum. That's the passion of President Trump. So too early to say on tariffs, but I feel quite confident having a smart businessman every day working for America writ large, not an interest group or a particular industry. I'm pretty optimistic about the outcome.
Hi, John Beers from Agence France Presse. I also have a question on tariffs. So you said in your speech that the previous administration had a quasi-religious view of climate change and was irrational. I'm starting to hear people liken this administration's view of tariffs to a religion. What do you think of that?
Oh, I haven't seen that at all. You know, we have behind closed doors vigorous debates about tariffs, people arguing all sides of that. Like every action, there's trade-offs. What is the ultimate outcome going to be? We don't know for sure. But it's definitely not a quasi-religious, dogmatic thing. It is a dialogue about what's the best way to benefit the American people. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite.
Elena Melker.
Spencer Kimball with CNBC. On the tariffs again, so there's this pause in place until April on USMCA compliant goods. For the 10% on Canadian energy imports, what percentage of that is USMCA compliant? Which percentage of the imports are still subject to tariffs? What will that do to prices? And what do you anticipate happening in April? Will the 10% move forward in full effect? Or is there a possibility that there's some sort of agreement that, pulls the tariffs back completely?
Yeah, so I would say too early to say, but very active dialogue going on. So that latter scenario is certainly possible, So too early to say, but I would say active dialogues within the administration and with the administration in Canada and Mexico and all of our trade partners.
Do you know how much those imports are USMCA compliant though, and which percentage aren't? Like what percentage of Canadian energy imports are subject to tariffs right now? Under the current status?
I'm going to avoid the details for now.
Elena Melkert, Oil and Gas Upstream Podcast. Secretary Wright. With respect to the national laboratories and who some call national treasure, could you comment on the required investment by private sector coupled with the role of national laboratories in early stage research that would bring the whole thing up to commercialization, any activities that they would pursue? Private sector.
So fantastic, Elena, and I love that idea, and that's certainly in tune with this administration, is how can we allow deals and collaboration and cooperation to happen? So from the national labs, we are in active dialogues with, in data center world, in AI world, in energy world, how can we bring private capital to better serve American consumers and to better serve our research at our national labs? So only 50 days in yet. But Elena, I think you hit the right point. Those dialogues are going on, and I think you will see growing partnerships between American businesses and American labs.
Hello, my name is Ryosuke Hanafusa. I work for a Japanese newspaper called Nikkei. I wanted to ask about Alaska LNG. The president has announced that the Japanese want to be partners in the LNG project. And what kind of additional support can the U.S. government do to make the project move forward? And do you think the Japanese companies are really interested in investing in this project?
From what I've seen, the Japanese companies are absolutely interested in investing in this project. I think this project is very emblematic of this administration. There are more, during the last administration, there were far more restrictions on Alaska producing oil, gas, and minerals than there were on Iran. We've sanctioned Alaska more than we've sanctioned Iran. So that, of course, is just nuts. That has hurt Alaskans, that has hurt Americans, that has hurt our allies, like Japan, for instance. So if the math works and the capital is raised and this pipeline is built, and I believe it will be, that's a 7-day sailing from LNG loading in Alaska to Japan, where from the Gulf Coast, this is 21 days, 28 days if you don't go through the Panama Canal. So I think it lowers cost from shipping costs. It's a very secure ocean way between the United States and Japan. So I'm actually quite optimistic that we'll have a great Japanese-American partnership in developing both the infrastructure and delivering the gas from Alaska to Japan. Thanks for bringing it up. And Japan has been a long-time tremendous ally for the United States, and we're looking to see that grow.
Okay, we have time for one final question right here.
Patty Dom Barons. Last year at this conference, there was a lot of talk about the all-of-the-above approach, not only from the technology companies that were here talking about net zero and the energy companies that were here, globally energy companies. Now, you talked about your view on wind, but what about solar? What about EVs? What is your mix that you see of the energy supply in the next 4 years?
So look, great question. And I would say it's quite the contrast. The previous administration talked about all of the above, but didn't walk all of the above. 83 to 85% of global energy come from hydrocarbons, and they were all of the above, except for that 85%. They were all above of the other 15% of global energy. Our view is I would say, is much more all of the above. Anything that adds affordable, reliable, secure energy, this administration is in favor of. Wind has been singled out because it's had a singularly poor record of driving up prices and getting increasing citizen outrage in the impacts on whether you're in a farm or you're in a coastal community. So wind is a little bit of a different case, but wind is less than 2% of global energy, and its biggest impact by far has been higher electricity prices. So it is all of the above. Solar is growing very rapidly in the United States. Wind deployment in the United States peaked 3 years ago. It's declined by almost 2/3 prior to the arrival of this administration. So solar is growing rapidly, and to the extent we can continue to move forward on storage, it can play a growing role. EVs, we're for all technologies and whatever everybody loves. Electric cars are super neat. The performance is great. I would say across this administration, there's fans of electric cars, plenty of owners of electric cars in this administration. So it's not against electric cars. It's against having all American taxpayers pay money so the mostly wealthy people that buy electric cars can buy them for cheaper. It's the distortion of that.
and the naive belief that somehow these are a huge reducer of greenhouse gas emissions. They simply are not. But consumers, businesses, build EVs, innovate EVs, sell them, consumers will buy them. We're for all of that. We're just not for reducing choice and taking American taxpayer money to subsidize wealthy people.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for your questions.
Thank you all. Thank you all for what you're doing. Keep writing on energy, keep researching. Appreciate you all.